What's up, guys? In previous months, I did a video about human rights and the People's Republics of China's opinion on them and why they don't give them much heed. But in recent months, and particularly in the last week, due to current events, felt it would be worth diving into the truth about human rights. In all honesty, states, whether they be communist, capitalist, democratic, authoritarian, states prioritize strategic and economic interests over principled commitments. Nobody, at the end of the day, gives a ton, cares that much regarding the more flowery aspects and components of language and rhetoric, such as human rights abuses and protecting human rights. Nobody starts a war over human rights abuses. They may claim they do, but there is always something else at stake. Something else in the formula that's motivating them and pushing them in a certain direction. When you look at World War II, for instance, the only reason that the Allies stopped the Holocaust was because they just so already happened to be at war with Nazi Germany. And arguably, if they hadn't been at war, the likelihood of anyone intervening to stop that, I highly doubt it would have occurred. And as I said previously, my video I made a few months ago focused a lot on China, but upon further analysis and research, the US government in the past, and you could argue, heck, even now, doesn't really abide by its principles of protecting human rights. The amount of times that the CIA or components of the CIA or components of the US government operating in foreign policy killed foreign democracies and instituted authoritarian regimes which did not abide by human rights observance and protecting human rights is innumerable. And that's just the declassified stuff. Or if you look to the Vietnam War, the US government, spearheaded by Henry Kissinger at the time, committed just about every human rights violation possible. Every human rights violation beneath the sun was either committed directly from US action or facilitated through proxies. Or, again, with Henry Kissinger facilitating terrible behavior in Bangladesh. And then here we are with another conflict, and a lot of people are saying, well, we've had regime change, succeeded in Japan and Germany, but what they forget is that that came at the cost of essentially genocidal fire bombings from the air. And sure, we didn't have high-tech precision weaponry back then, but we just decided the strategic decision was to collectively punish the civilian population of the Japanese and the Germans to get them to capitulate. And then in the case of Japan, it took the atomic bombs on top of that. And not only did it require horrific levels of bombardment, but it required a ground invasion. I guess in the case of Japan, they had surrendered by the time the troops got there, but it required permanent military occupation. Germany required a ground invasion from both sides, and then a permanent military occupation. To this very day, U.S. service members can be stationed in Japan or Germany. even though the war ended 80 years ago. In that sense, since U.S. troops and a U.S. diplomatic presence was able to reshape and contribute to economic recovery in said locations, and heck, troops marrying the locals, risen them over, was able to help reshape the narrative and help people forget and move past it. This never came about, for instance, in North Korea, where North Korea was destroyed, bombed indiscriminately through an air campaign as well. Well, you can point fingers and say, well, that was China's fault because they wouldn't negotiate and bring in good faith and bring an end to the war. That doesn't change the fact that everything north of the 38th parallel was bombed. South Korea was extremely damaged as well. But, again, the presence of U.S. forces and contribution to economic growth and recovery helped people move on, forgive and forget. That did not happen in North Korea. And while you could argue that, of course, North Korea has a terrible human rights record now, in truth, perhaps the United States government during that conflict was the first one to violate the human rights up there. Maybe that's a bit of an exaggeration, but what we need to understand is that there is some reason to the madness. To the outsider, North Korea seems crazy. Crazy! How quickly we forget that there's a context behind every behavior.